She was an alien healer, shunned by her own kind for one reason: she could never bear children. In a society where fertility meant worth, she was called empty, useless, even cursed. She prepared to live her life alone, hidden in the shadows. But then a human came, gentle, patient, and unafraid of her scars. When she confessed her deepest shame, he only took her hands and whispered, "You are enough. I'll be enough for us both." And in that moment, she realized love was never about what you could give, but about who would stay when you had nothing left. She had never once felt truly seen, not even on the day she completed her training as a healer, standing among a sea of shimmering alien graduates draped in bright silken robes. While others laughed and tossed ceremonial flower petals into the air, she stood at the edge, her blue hands trembling. She was proud of her knowledge, of every herb, every chant, every regenerative serum she had learned to create, but inside her chest there throbbed a secret that gnawed at her night after night. She was barren. Unable to bear young, a flaw so catastrophic among her people that even the mention of it would earn pitying looks and whispered curses. On her world, one's entire worth was measured by the life they could carry forward, the strong children they could give to the clan. Yet she, born under a pale red moon, had been marked from the start. The healers who examined her as a youngling had sighed and patted her head, told her to focus on study and service, to find comfort in helping others. But every ritual feast, every public pairing ceremony, every echo of newborn cries cut deeper into her soul. She grew accustomed to moving quietly in the corners, pouring warm tea for others, applying salves to swelling bellies, singing soft birthing chants she would never need for herself. And so, year by year, she watched love drift around her like a distant star, always glowing, always unreachable. She thought she could endure this half-life forever, content to care for the elders, to tend the gardens beneath the humming moon lamps, to keep her hands busy enough that her heart might forget. But then the first human ship arrived, a sleek, scarred vessel seeking repair and trade. It dropped into orbit like a fallen bird, and within hours the village square swelled with excitement. Traders, elders, even children gathered, curious to see these flesh-colored newcomers who moved with such confident ease. She avoided the center plaza at first, afraid her difference would only be magnified in the presence of these warm, loud beings. But the scent of roasted roots and burning sage drifted into her little garden, pulling her closer, until one day she finally stood at the edge of the gathering, clutching her basket of leaves. That was when she saw him, taller than most humans, hair a dusky brown that reminded her of late autumn reeds, eyes like rich earth after rain. He moved through the market without arrogance, offering small nods, asking about herbs, holding up each object as if it were precious. The other villagers observed him cautiously. Some still believed humans were barbaric, only seeking resources and conquest, but she saw no threat in him. There was an almost childlike wonder in the way he turned over carved trinkets and watched silvery incense smoke curl toward the ceiling. She didn't mean to step forward, but her foot moved on its own, and suddenly he was looking at her. Their eyes met, and in that instant, she felt as if every guarded wall within her cracked, and starlight rushed in. He smiled, not a forced trader's grin but a real, slow smile that warmed her skin all the way down to her trembling fingertips. He approached, stopping just close enough that she could smell the salt and warmth of his skin. She lowered her head instinctively, waiting for him to pass, but instead he extended a hand. She flinched. Hands were sacred among her kind, reserved for only the deepest bonds, but he kept his hand outstretched, patient. Finally, she raised her palm and laid it against his. Heat sparked along her nerves, a trembling electric current she had never felt before. He introduced himself simply, his voice gentle, eyes filled with an openness that made her chest ache. As he spoke, he did not once glance at the others or at her healer's insignia or her robe color. He looked only at her. The world around them seemed to dim, the bustling market noise fading until only his voice remained. From that day he returned often, bringing small fruits from the forest, foreign grains, stories of distant worlds. She listened, fascinated, often forgetting to respond until he laughed softly and teased her about her dreamy eyes. Sometimes he would help her grind medicinal powders, his large fingers clumsy yet earnest. They sat side by side in the cool shade of her small greenhouse, sunlight catching in the fine lines of his face. He asked questions no one had ever bothered to ask her, about her favorite flowers, about the subtle differences between moonlight and starlight, about her own dreams. One evening, while mixing a calming salve, her hands trembled so violently she dropped the pestle. He caught her wrists gently, and in the sudden hush, she blurted the truth she had hidden her entire life. She told him she was barren, that she could never carry children, never offer a lineage, never fulfill the role expected of her. Her words spilled like rain, each syllable another confession she thought would push him away. She could barely raise her head to look at him, bracing for pity or horror, the same expressions she'd grown to expect. But instead of recoiling, he leaned forward, touching his forehead to hers. His breath was warm, and when he spoke, his voice shook slightly, not from disgust, but from a surge of fierce tenderness. He told her she was not empty, that she had already nurtured life in every creature she healed, every sprout she tended, every lonely heart she calmed. He told her that life was not only measured in children, that love was not a transaction of wombs and bloodlines. She felt his words wash over her like a long-awaited rain on a parched garden. That night she wept, not from despair, but from a raw, cleansing relief. He stayed by her side, holding her as though she might vanish into starlight. When she finally looked into his eyes again, she saw no demand, no hunger for something she could not give. Instead, she saw a vast patient sea, a promise deeper than any ritual vow. The following days felt dreamlike. When they walked through the gardens together, villagers stared, some in confusion, some in scorn, but he never let go of her hand. He helped her collect moonleaf blossoms at dawn, carried her baskets of herbs, and shared his food with the gentle grace of a seasoned wanderer. She began to feel her steps lightening, her shoulders straightening, as though an invisible weight had been lifted. He began introducing her to small joys, stargazing under a thick woven blanket, learning the names of alien constellations, roasting strange seeds over an open flame. Each moment layered warmth into her soul, making her believe in something she had never dared to dream, that she was worthy of being chosen, not despite her barrenness, but simply because she was herself. One twilight, as violet shadows danced across the garden walls, he cupped her face and said softly, "I'll be enough for us both." She almost collapsed from the force of those words. To be loved without condition, to be enough without offering anything more than her heart. It felt like being reborn. She clung to him, her whole body trembling. Villagers whispered, some accused her of seducing him, others claimed she was weak for binding herself to a human who could never understand their traditions. But she no longer cared. The voices blurred into wind as long as she felt his arms around her. He started repairing the old cabin beside her greenhouse, turning it into a shared home, every plank hammered with quiet devotion, every window polished until starlight poured in like gentle rivers. Her fingers learned to map the contours of his face in the dark, the scar above his eyebrow, the soft dimple that appeared when he laughed. He learned her favorite teas, her quietest songs, the delicate curl of her hair when damp from rain. Their shared silences became sacred, a language of glances, light touches and slow smiles. When she spoke of her fear of being left, he only held her tighter. When she confessed her recurring nightmares of exile, he stayed up through the night, humming lullabies until her shaking stopped. Slowly, her world filled with unexpected color, bright speckles of joy, sudden gusts of laughter, long walks under moon halos. She found herself planting new seedlings, flowers she had once deemed frivolous. She wove a small garland for his hair, which he wore proudly during the next market trip despite the elders' glares. He started crafting small wooden charms shaped like stars, leaving them on her work table each morning. With each small gesture, they wove a tapestry of daily love, fragile yet more enduring than any official vow. The woman who once only healed others now felt herself healing from the inside out. The loneliness that had once gnawed at her spirit became a distant echo. And for the first time, when she watched the sunrise, she felt no longing for what could never be, only gratitude for what was unfolding right beside her. One evening, after a shared meal of honey-roasted roots and spiced petals, she reached across the table and took his hand. Her voice, still shy but steady, rose above the flickering candlelight. She told him she wanted to build something beyond just surviving, that she wanted to create a shared life, a sanctuary for all the broken, abandoned creatures they might find, a place for every lonely sprout to bloom. His eyes shone with tears, and he simply nodded, squeezing her hand so gently she thought her heart might shatter from the beauty of it. In that moment, the universe felt small enough to fit in her palm, and she realized she had finally found a home, not in a child or a clan's approval, but in a single human's unwavering gaze. She would never carry life inside her womb, but with him, she felt as though galaxies had been born in her chest. And so began a new chapter, one neither of them had expected, but one they would write together, under stars that no longer looked quite so cold. The first morning in their shared home felt like stepping into a sunrise, soft, tentative, but full of promise. She awoke before dawn, slipping from the bed to listen to the early bird cries that drifted down from the forest edge. For the first time in years, her hands did not move immediately toward bandages or tinctures. They hovered in the air uncertain, as though she was learning her own limbs all over again. She turned, and he was there, his silhouette framed by the faint glow creeping into the small window. His hair stuck out wildly, and when he yawned, she felt an uncontrollable warmth bloom in her chest, something between a laugh and a sob. She busied herself preparing tea, her fingers brushing the rim of each cup with reverence. He joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. In that moment, she realized how starved she had been for such gentle weight, for warmth that asked nothing of her but to exist. She closed her eyes, leaning back into him, her breath catching when he kissed the curve of her neck. The days stretched into weeks, then months. The villagers continued to whisper, some even stopped visiting her garden altogether, afraid of the human influence, calling her the hollow vessel who betrayed tradition. She used to flinch at such words, but now she would only glance at him and feel the sting fade like morning mist. Together, they built a small sanctuary on the edge of the woods, exactly as she had envisioned. It started as a simple shelter for injured animals and wounded travelers, but soon, lost children, abandoned elders, and even a few curious neighbors began to trickle in. She would hum as she crushed healing herbs, her voice carrying through the newly built halls. He reinforced the walls, gathered firewood, repaired roofs, his laughter echoing through the air like the call of migrating birds. Sometimes, during long twilight walks, he would stop abruptly and point to the sky. That one, he'd say, tracing a constellation she could never quite see the same way. He told stories of Earth, of forests dense and green beyond imagination, of oceans so deep they swallowed light, of cities glowing like fireflies against midnight fields. Her eyes would widen, her imagination soaring beyond her planet's clouds for the first time. One night, after a particularly long day tending to a sick mother and her infant, she sat beside him in front of the small fireplace. Her fingers were stained with roots, and a streak of moon dust marked her cheek. He reached out and brushed it away, his thumb lingering on her skin as though he were memorizing each freckle and scar. She met his gaze, feeling her throat tighten. "Do you ever regret it?" she whispered. "That you came here, that you chose me?" He tilted his head, his eyes searching hers deeply. Then, in a voice low and steady as an ancient river, he said, "I don't regret a single step. I didn't just choose you, I found you. And now, there's nowhere else I want to be." She tried to answer but found her voice caught behind a sudden rush of tears. Instead, she buried her face into his chest, clutching at his shirt. His arms wrapped around her, anchoring her as waves of emotion flooded her. In that embrace, she felt every broken piece of her soul knit itself back together, one heartbeat at a time. The seasons turned, and she began to notice small changes in herself, not in the way her people measured worth, but in the quiet resilience blossoming beneath her ribs. She discovered new ways to heal, guided by his earth techniques mixed with her native remedies. She found joy in creating medicines that smelled like wild berries, or pastes that glowed faintly under starlight. One winter, an elder from a distant mountain tribe arrived, carrying a youngling weak from frostbite. She worked tirelessly for days, sleeping in short bursts on the floor beside the child. When she finally succeeded in saving the tiny creature's legs, the elder dropped to his knees in gratitude. He offered her rare mountain crystals, old enough to sing in certain moonlight. She refused the gifts, pointing instead to the small garden where the humans sat carving wooden toys. "He is my gift," she said softly. The elder looked confused, but she only smiled, feeling warmth spread through her like molten gold. That evening, she sat beside her human, watching as he held up each tiny wooden figure, animals, stars, small abstract shapes, and arranged them in a circle around her feet. He lifted one shaped like a delicate blue flower and tucked it behind her ear. The moment felt ceremonial, almost sacred, and when she leaned forward to press her forehead to his, he sighed. As if he had been waiting his whole life for that exact contact. As more creatures and wanderers came to their sanctuary, she saw him blossom in unexpected ways. He taught the children simple earth songs, showed the elders how to mend broken tools using stubborn earth adhesives, and taught even the shyest visitors to plant seeds in careful rows. In return, he learned her language more fluently, picking up subtle dialects and ceremonial phrases that only the oldest healers still remembered. Late at night, she would watch him sleep, his chest rising and falling steadily. She would trace the outline of his hand in the air, memorizing every angle. Some nights she wept silently, not from sorrow, but from a gratitude so overwhelming it felt like lightning dancing in her veins. She no longer mourned the absence of children. She no longer measured her worth against the womb she had once cursed. Instead, she saw her value mirrored in his steady devotion, in the soft gazes of those they healed together, in the small footprints running through the garden paths. One spring morning, while planting glowflowers near the sanctuary gates, a small child approached her shyly. The child, an orphan from the southern canyons, clutched a smooth stone shaped like an egg. "Is it true?" the child asked in a trembling voice. "You can't make babies?" She froze. For a moment, her old pain rose like a ghost, but before she could respond, her human stepped forward, kneeling beside the child. He looked into the youngling's wide eyes and nodded solemnly. "Yes," he said, his voice warm, "she cannot bear children in the way your people think. But she does something even more beautiful. She makes gardens bloom where there is only dust. She makes hearts strong where there was only fear." She makes a home where there was only cold ground. The child's eyes glistened, and then, without another word, they pressed the stone into her hands and ran off. She turned to her human, her lips trembling, and before she could say anything, he leaned forward and kissed her. A long, patient kiss that tasted of tears and sunlit soil. They began a tradition that day, planting a flower every time someone joined their sanctuary or every time they healed an animal or a traveler. Slowly, the once barren forest edge transformed into a mosaic of colors and scents. During the new moon, the flowers glowed faintly, reflecting moonlight in an ethereal dance that looked like a starfield had fallen to earth. The sanctuary became a legend among the outer tribes. Songs were sung of the blue-skinned healer who turned away all riches and titles, and of the strange human who chose her above all else. Visitors spoke of the warmth that radiated from their small home, of the laughter that echoed like chimes in the wind, of the love so radiant it stitched together every broken spirit who crossed their path. Years passed, and their hair grew streaks of silver, hers shimmering like frost on midnight petals, his catching the dawn light like thin threads of gold. They worked side by side, sharing simple meals, quiet jokes, and long silences filled with a profound language only they understood. On the eve of a great festival, the villagers who once shunned her arrived bearing offerings. They bowed low before her, some with tears, some too ashamed to meet her gaze. Their clan had suffered great sickness, and they begged her to come. Without hesitation, she took up her old healer's satchel. Her human packed additional supplies, tied her cloak, and pressed a protective charm into her palm. When she returned days later, weary but triumphant, he met her at the forest edge. He caught her before she collapsed, scooping her into his arms. The villagers trailed behind, singing blessings they had once denied her. In that moment, as the first evening stars peeked through the sky, she realized she had finally been accepted, not because she changed, but because she stayed true. That night, after the villagers had gone, they sat quietly on their small porch. Fireflies drifted around them like floating embers. She rested her head on his shoulder, and they watched the moon rise, its pale glow painting the flower fields in silver light. "I used to think I was cursed," she whispered. "That I would always be incomplete." He turned to her, pressing his forehead gently against hers. "I know," he murmured. "But you were always whole to me. You were always enough." She closed her eyes, breathing in his warmth, feeling every heartbeat echo the quiet vow he had once spoken, "I'll be enough for us both." And she believed it now, deeply, without doubt. In his arms, she felt more alive than any childbearing rite could promise. Together, they had grown something far more sacred, a shared spirit, a home that pulsed with life and love, a testament to the human capacity to heal and the alien strength to endure. When the final petal drifted from the moonbloom that year, she knew the universe had given her a gift beyond measure. Not in the form of children or clan honor, but in the shape of a single human who saw her, truly saw her, and chose her again and again, through every storm and every starlit night. And in that quiet, shared breath beneath the endless sky, they knew they had already created the greatest legacy of all. A love so whole it could never be measured by any womb, only by the echoing warmth they left in every heart they touched.